know, when the room gets kind of quiet, it's time for me to pay attention and start the meeting. So this is the Metropolitan Council meeting this July 23rd. Welcome, I'm Chair Zelli, and we have a robust agenda of business items and the information item. But first, we start with our Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement, and I can think of no better way than having our new council member, Councilmember Jenkins.
All right. Thank you, Chair. So the Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county region, is the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Iote. Who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Iote, the Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Iote, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned, we have a robust agenda. Unless there's an objection, I will deem the agenda approved. Which brings us to our minutes from the meeting held July 9th, 2025. Unless there's an objection, correction, addition, question, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
Move approval.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Those minutes are approved. So this is the time in the meeting where we invite members of the public to address the council on matters that are not on the agenda, limited to 3 minutes. And we actually had a person call in advance, Liam Athas, to ask for permission. Is Liam here?
Yes, I'm here.
Liam, you have 3 minutes. Welcome. You can come to the front. You can sit, stand, whatever. You wish.
I've never done this before. So.
Okay, so far you're
doing great.
So far it's been great. I'm just gonna say.
I actually brought a little number with me too. So
Perfect.
just 3 minutes on the clock, right?
Right.
As you said, hello, my name is Liam Athas. I've been a resident of the Twin Cities for about 3 or 4 years now. As a full-time student, worker, and Metro Transit rider. And surprisingly, in those 3 to 4 years, I've never needed to own a car or bicycle because thanks to the good efforts of the council, I always have public transit to rely on. It's not always the safest, granted, it's not always the most time efficient, but it's cheap, reliable, means of public transit that I think me and a lot of people here in the Twin Cities can rely on. But in these last few months, I've been quite frankly blown away with the new beeline that this council has established. Just last May, it would have taken me an hour and a half to get to my job in St. Paul. That's 10 minutes on the A line, about an hour and a half on the Green Line. It was not fun. I'd lose about 2 hours every day, there and back. But with this new beeline, my commute to work takes 15 minutes. 15! I actually timed it this morning, if you want to take a look. 17 minutes and 9 seconds, and that's waiting for the bus as well. Do you know how incredible that is? It's astonishing. That means I get an extra hour every morning to sleep in, shower, eat breakfast, and in the afternoon, I have more time to make a better dinner, exercise, enjoy my hobbies more, get a beer with the boys. It's life-changing. Just to put this into perspective, I now exercise 30 minutes every day because of this time. I donated blood for the first time. I'm going to public libraries I didn't even know existed. I'm getting more time with my professors, I'm getting more hours with my studies, all because of these 2 extra hours in the day this Beeline gives me. So because you all gave me so much more time in my life, I just want to take some of that time to personally thank each and every one of you in this council chamber. I want to thank you for the hard work that you put in, the good public service for this community. I want to thank you for the better sleep I'm getting, the better exercise, and everything I can now do because of this extra time you've given me with the Beeline. I mean, I hear it every day. People love living in the Twin Cities. And this is why, because of good public service like this. And I thank you for it.
Wow.
Liam,
You gotta extend his time.
We don't get this.
Liam, on behalf of everybody in this room, I can assure you, we appreciate your statement. And I'll do 2 things. One is, I think we need to direct our planners and our marketing folks to consider the goals of being well-fed, exercised, good sleep, better and alert at your job. And we're going to find the HR department to track you down because we really need you to be part of our group. So thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, could I just mention too, I don't know if you're going to stay tonight, but we're actually talking about this particular topic later on and the future expansion of the system with lines like the Beeline. So in case you're interested, we won't hold it against you if you don't stay for the presentation, but if you choose to, just know that we continue to want to expand in those ways across this region so more people like you can come up and share those types of comments.
Very timely.
And
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, and to add on, and it's all for you. The whole thing is.
Is there any other member of the public who would like to address the council? All righty. All right, seeing nobody, again, thanks, Liam. And we are on to our consent business items to consider. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second, thank you. And any discussion on our consent business items? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The business consent items are approved. There are no reports from the Community Development Committee. There is one from the Environment Committee, which I understand Councilmember Wolf will be able to address.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is business item 2025-157. On July 8th, the Environmental Services staff presented the 2026 wastewater rates and charges to the Environment Committee. The wastewater charges are proposed to increase by 5.8%, and they are based on the cost of service and flow, and is distributed out to our customers. Staff also presented the rates and charges to customers in May and June at 4 different forums, 2 for our industrial customers and 2 for the municipal customers, the city people. We got a lot of feedback, and we had 50 attendees from 30 communities. Feedback was overall positive. There were some questions that staff was able to answer at the forums, but overall it was received positively. In addition, SAC rates are proposed to remain at $2,485 per SAC unit, which is flat now for the 12th year in a row. We've been able to do that due to a healthy development environment and keeping our costs down. So we're passing that savings on to the residents and businesses that are building in our region. Therefore, I move that the rates and charges in the business item 2025-157, adoption of Metropolitan Council Environmental Services wastewater rates and charges, be approved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? It is quite remarkable we've been able to keep our rates, is it 30% below national averages? It's somewhere. I heard that earlier today. That's very strong. 35%. Councilmember Wolf.
Mr. Chair, you should take that number with a grain of salt because the communities that have really high rates stop reporting. So we're actually probably a lot better than 35% below the average. We're 35% below the average of the people who are willing to say what their rates are.
35% below those communities that fess up to what their rates are. That's a really important statistic. We're going to remember that. All right, any more discussion? Councilman, Regional Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one piece of context to some of our broader work as we talk about, climate and changing climate around us. We have been challenged in some of these recent years, and municipalities more than us, but in the way we need to keep talking about significant rainfall events that happen at one time and how that can have an impact on who pays based on who has leakier infrastructure than other communities, and that's becoming a bigger issue. And that's just something that's being talked about. I know it'll continue to be talked about at Environment Committee and through our teams as well. But I just want to highlight and appreciate those conversations that our staff are leading to try to communicate that information about why is this different than it was 10 years ago. It's becoming, even when we're not getting more rainfall, we're getting it in fewer events that are more intense. And that is changing the nature of some of this. And as a long-standing policy item, I think that's something that will continue to come before the council in the years to come.
Exactly. All right, hearing no more comments, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, that action is approved. On to the Management Committee. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Management Committee is pleased to bring forward item 2025-174. This is a same week item, and it is council property insurance renewal. The business item seeks council authorization to bind coverage of its property insurance effective 8/1 of 2025 to 8/1 of 2026 in an amount not to exceed $4,670,000. This insurance provides coverage for damage to physical property as well as expenses incurred to continue operations after a loss. 3 years ago, the council switched insurance companies and partnered with FM Global. For this year's renewal, staff worked with the council's insurance broker to benchmark FM Global's quote against the industry, not only comparing the rate, but also the coverage. FM Global's rate was not only very competitive, but continued to provide the appropriate coverage for the council's risks. Therefore, the recommendation is to renew the insurance with FM Global. And at management, we had this item today, and Phil Walljasper gave us the whole understanding behind it. And just to know too, when we go out and do a benchmark, we really utilize our agent because we have services that are harder to benchmark if you think about the variety and some of the interesting things that we do here at the council. So, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize binding coverage of its property insurance effective August 1st, 2025 to August 1st, 2026 in an amount not to exceed $4,670,000.
Great, thank you. Is there a second? Second, thank you. Any discussion?
Again, I just want to thank Phil and the team and everybody who works so hard to keep our insurance where it needs to be and working with our broker, going out to market, and we're in a really good position. So thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil. Anybody else? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion's carried. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the Management Committee is pleased to bring forward business item 2025-175, again, a same week item. This is a request for the council to procure new legislative file management software system called Legistar for the council. Currently, the Met Council has 16 meeting bodies that hold public meetings, and the mechanism to create and publish agendas, minutes, and notify the public of its meetings, and a manual process through the council's website platform, Connecticut. This is very time-consuming. It's an arduous process with ample room for unintended mistakes. This business item proposes investment in the Legistar software system, a sophisticated cloud-based software that stores all business files and attachments in one spot. Legistar has the ability to pull information from the original business file document to generate agendas, minutes, committee reports, and meeting packets in a matter of seconds. In addition, the software is ADA compliant, which is huge, as it creates accessible agendas and minutes for the public who uses readers. The software encoder supports live streaming of meetings and captions and timestamp of the meetings and agenda items. This software is easily integrated into the council's website platform and AV system, where we've already invested in AV equipment for public meeting rooms. In addition, Legistar has a sophisticated search functionality that anyone can use to find business items by keyword, year, business item, number, et cetera. So therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 25M030 with Carasoft, an authorized software reseller, in conjunction with the State of Texas Department of Information Resources with a cooperative contract, DIR CPO-5131. We've talked about those cooperative agreements, so it's really great we can get involved with this one for Granicus Legistar software system in an amount not to exceed $768,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I see that this is our administrative improvement, and I must say, finding efficiencies more than just having more people, it's having great systems. And me, you've done a great job already. So
And Mr. Chair, if I may, again, we had this item at management today. Me did an outstanding job presenting to us. Her leadership, her tenacity, her know-how, and her experience are going to be huge for this council's efficiencies. It'll be great internally, but then externally, we had a pretty robust discussion about how the public will be able to access our files. I will admit I even looked for stuff on the council's website, and I can't find it either. So just the human labor that goes into it, this is going to be a big deal, so thank you for your leadership, me. We really appreciate it.
thank you. Any other comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous, me. Thank you. All right, that motion is approved. On to the Transportation Committee. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2025-154 is regarding the approval of a contract amendment for design and construction services for the Blue Line LRT Laketown Midtown renovation project. Contract 23P050 was awarded to 4RM plus ULA Architects in early 2024 to complete the design of a renovation to the Lake Street Midtown LRT station. Throughout the design process, there has been extensive coordination with internal stakeholders that have led to out-of-scope stakeholder-driven items. Those items include a new transit service center and support staff back-of-the-house accommodations. In addition to those items, there have been numerous unforeseen conditions, including a large underground storm sewer system that has led to redesign of project elements. With 4RM plus ULA being the lead designer, this project's DBE goal of 12% is exceeded with a current spend of 40% towards DBE vendors. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute an amendment to the contract 23P050 with 4RM plus ULA Architects for the Metro Blue Line Lake Street Midtown Station renovation design and construction support services in an amount not to exceed $1,245,107.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion's carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2025-155 is regarding a contract for design and construction services for the Blue Line LRT Franklin Station renovation project. Franklin Station is a highly used light rail facility that has had consistent all-day ridership since its opening in 2004. Due to frequent use and added stress on the infrastructure since the pandemic, the station requires renovation. This redesign project includes renovation of both elevator towers, replacement of the platform elements, including the shelters, canopy, and benches, and modernization of wayfinding multimodal access. Contract 25P213 includes full design of the station and construction services. The contract review panel recommends the proposal submitted by Kimley Horn as the most advantageous to the council. The Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity established a 12% DBE goal for the project and has determined that Kimley Horn has met the DBE requirements. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 25P213 with Kimley Horn for design and construction services support in an amount not to exceed $3,299,839.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We decided to bring both of these items with these key stations to the full council for approval because we want to definitely recognize kind of the ongoing investment that we're doing in our transit system. These are two of our busiest stations on our light rail system, and anyone who's been out on the system knows that it's time for upgrades on these areas. And so we just want to make sure that everyone's fully aware that we're being very proactive and knowing that we have to reinvest into the system and make it as friendly to riders as possible.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair Zoe. I really appreciated having this come before the Transportation Committee. And in addition to what has been said about the improvements, there has been work with the community surrounding this station as well. And they are going to be very happy to know that we've got some very detailed safety plans and provisions in this renovation as well.
Any other questions? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to see this work proceeding. I know when we went to the Committee of the Whole on Franklin Avenue, I had a hard time finding my way out of the station and figuring out how to get down to the street. So having additional funding will certainly be appreciated for people who aren't at that station every day so they can find their way around. I hope that this will include also dealing with the fence underneath that MnDOT put in on the sidewalk so that people can actually get to the station. If that's not something that's being discussed, maybe we should be discussing how to let pedestrians actually use the sidewalk.
And I kind of was going to have that question myself. Are we collaborating with MnDOT? And I know Councilmember Littlegan will have an interest in this as well.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Wolf, Councilmember Littlegan, anyone else. I kind of was just in a conversation on this topic yesterday. So I was asking similar questions around the surrounding infrastructure and how does that align with our work to see the station redesign take place and occur. And there's community conversations around the redesign of the station that are taking place, have taken place, and will continue to take place. There are plans afoot to bring in the direct conversation that the council member just raised about pedestrian access, continued fencing off, because there is a broader piece to the area as well around things that might start out feeling as safety. By fencing everything off makes it feel less safe at the outset. And that is clearly a dynamic going on in that particular part of our region. And we can't make these decisions unilaterally, but we need to get partners in the room while we're engaged with community and our architect to ensure that we are getting to good decisions that reopen up pedestrian pathways.
Yeah, Councilmember.
Thank you for pausing for this conversation. Thanks, Councilmember Wolf, for your comments, Councilmember Chambliss as well. And for those of you who haven't been down there, the sidewalk is completely fenced off under the bridge under Highway 55 and the LRT, so pedestrians can't use it, which I can't imagine is ADA compliant in any way, shape, or form. But I will also note, it's not just MnDOT that's fenced up their property there, and it was a desperate response to the conditions under the bridge last summer when there was a whole community that sprung up that was either living under those bridges or engaging in unwelcome behaviors under those bridges as well. But the city has right of way, the county, others, we may even have some that's fenced off. And so it's hard for me to talk about this without my head exploding, because this is an area that my day job, the organization, invests heavily in creating a destination of the American Indian Culture Corridor right there. And instead it feels like a prison and you can't use the pedestrian area. So it was the community never asked for this, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone in the community speak positively of having our entire end of our cultural corridor feel like a prison. And so I've just made my personal determination, and it's good to hear this conversation, that now you have to pick your battles, right? And so this seemed like an awfully big one to pick, but I can tell from what's happening here, what's happening in other tables, what's happening in the community. Now is the time to reopen the pedestrian realm in that area. So I'm sure this project will help contribute to momentum there.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Anyone else? All right, so noted. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Business item number 2025-179 is for awarding the St. Paul and Anoka County Transit Service contract. The Metropolitan Transportation Services provides regular route transit service under competitively procured multi-year agreements. This specific contract package includes service primarily in the East Metro and Anoka County. A request for proposals was issued on March 6, 2025, and one proposal was received on April 16, 2025. That proposal was submitted by Transdev North America. An evaluation panel consisting of staff from MTS and Metro Transit Service Development reviewed that proposal and reached consensus that the proposal is advantageous to the council and recommended it for award. The value of the base service level is approximately $46.9 million, and the requested contract value not to exceed is $56.2 million, which allows for revenue hour increases of up to 20% as permitted by contract terms. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 25P010 with Transdev North America for regular route service under the St. Paul and Anoka County contract in amount not to exceed $56,200,000.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carried. We have no joint reports. We do have one other business item, 2025-173, the appointment to the Transportation Advisory Board. And I won't describe the entire Transportation Advisory Board, but only to say that the MEC, out of this 34-member body, the Met Council appoints 12 members, and one position is up for reappointment due to the vacancy of District F, which has become vacant due to Mark Jenkins, our council member, joining this body. So we are effective July 9th. I am recommending the appointment of Torrin Gustafson, who was the alternate, I think, for your position, and so is informed, qualified, and ready to be appointed with the ratification of this body. So with that, having made that recommendation, is there a motion and a second to approve?
So moved.
Motion.
Motion approved by Councilman Lilligren. Any discussion?
Yeah. Just
Go ahead.
call out for Torrin. He was my alternate for 1.5 terms on the tab, and I followed his engagement and support for the Purple Line and transit in his community and in that district. So glad to see him get the opportunity to step up.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you for your mentorship. All right, having heard that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that appointment has been confirmed. On to our information agenda, and as Ryan had mentioned, we're going to get an update on our ABRTs, and it's really exciting to hear about the future, especially when what is currently operating seems to be going with some success. So we'll keep that momentum going. Welcome, Kyle.
Great. Thank you, council members. As mentioned, my name is Kyle O'Donnell Burrows, and I promise I did not pay Liam to be here. That was, but it was really, encouraging. So I'm very excited to talk about this this program advancing and the good work that we're doing there, and it really is just exciting to see the positive effect that we're having on people's lives. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. So we're here today to provide an update on the arterial BRT plan update process. We were previously before the council at the Committee of the Whole in April, sharing the initial 17 candidate corridors that we identified for consideration to advance through the next steps here. Today, we are sharing the results of the screening process and the 10 corridors advancing past that step for more detailed evaluation. So we'll first start with a little bit of a review of the scope of our work, as well as the previous candidate corridors that were identified, before then getting into the screening criteria and the results of that screening, as well as talking about upcoming engagement and next steps. So this is a reminder slide here just to level set us back on what our expectations are for the work. Our goal is to identify the next programmed arterial BRT lines to be implemented between 2030 and 2035. And those lines would be designated as the J, K, and L lines, sort of continuing our path down the alphabet here. We also have a secondary goal to identify additional candidate corridors for consideration prior to 2050. These would not be prioritized or programmed as a lettered line, so are just kind of good candidates for future consideration. Our goal is to complete this work in time to feed into the 2026 regional solicitation process, where we would submit the J line into that process for consideration. And then outcomes of this work would be adopted into the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan via amendment in 2026. Positioning arterial BRT, pausing here to sort of fit arterial BRT within our broader local bus network context. Of course, as we all know, arterial BRT is not the only tool that Metro Transit has available to us to meet our transit and transportation needs throughout the region. And we really apply a variety of tools based on sort of the need and the goal that we are trying to accomplish. And those tools, those different route types, fall within a spectrum of coverage on one side and sort of ridership on the other. And of course, nothing is 100% one or the other, but just sort of what is the most primary purpose along these. On that coverage end of the spectrum, our goal is to provide coverage, basically. So transit coverage over a geographic area, where this is really basic access to make sure that a specific area has at least some access by transit. Even if a very limited number of folks will actually be using it, it's really there to be that basic level of access. On the other end of that service, of that spectrum, is ridership-oriented services. And here, of course, the goal is to serve as many people as possible. So it's sort of separate from a geographic area and focused more on specific, on people. So we're really trying to be as useful as possible to as many people as possible. And our metric here is really how many people are ultimately riding the service as the measure of how useful it is. And arterial BRT, the tool that we're talking about here today, and that's the subject of this planning effort, really falls within that end of the spectrum in terms of the tools that we have available to us. Obviously, other local routes, suburban local routes, urban local routes, kind of fall within that at various points along that space. And our regional policy reflects that purpose as sort of as on the more ridership side of things. The Transportation Policy Plan, the 2050 TPP guidance, is that arterial BRT should be serving 25 or more passengers per in-service hour. So this is the highest expectation for any type of bus service that we operate in terms of the number of what that's called productivity. And the TPP also directs us to focus primarily in transit market areas 1 and 2 for this style of service. So now getting into the process that we're undertaking here to kind of develop this update to our plan. Folks have seen this slide before, where we're continuing to proceed along this 4-step process. Our first step, which we talked about in April, was to identify a large set of candidate corridors for consideration. So we started with that 17 candidate corridors. Those are drawn from a number of different sources. We'll talk about those briefly in a moment. We have now completed that second step, our screening step, and are preparing to bring these results out for public engagement and conversation about those screening steps. This is the step where we are really narrowing down to the most promising corridors to then bring forward and evaluate in more detail with the rest of our time in this plan update process. So following public engagement, we will be doing that then evaluation step, which is step 3, where we'll be taking these corridors that we've identified and really ranking them in sort of order of technical score based on a number of more in-depth evaluation criteria that align with our overall project goals. That technical score is not the only piece that's important for selecting the J, K, and L lines, and so we really have this prioritization step to allow us to be looking at other readiness criteria in a corridor, making sure that we are, aligned with, other planning processes that may be occurring, and very intentionally coordinating with our other roadway partners to be aligning planned and programmed projects, making sure that we are doing the best we can to be delivering these projects concurrently with any other planned roadway projects that might be occurring along these corridors. So step one, this is a recap slide, just kind of level setting us back with the candidate corridors we started from. So these 17 corridors have really been drawn from a number of primary sources. The 2040 Transportation Policy Plan identified a number of candidate corridors we should be starting from. We're also looking at high frequency, high ridership existing local bus routes as a really good starting place for us to be making this level of additional investment, as well as planned high frequency corridors based on the recently completed Network Now planning process that we undertook to identify what should our local bus network look like over the next several years. And then finally, policy priorities, other policy priorities for consideration, as well as coordinating with our city and county partners for particular corridors that they might have a strong interest in us considering through this process as well. So this is that list of candidate corridors. This is the starting place, so 1 through 17. These are listed in alphabetical order, so the numbers don't imply any rank other than just being in alphabetical order there. So that's where we started from. We have also been using a series of 4 goals to guide our work, both identifying those corridors and then also as we're applying these screening and evaluation criteria going forward. So those 4 goals we've looked at before, but as a reminder, they are to build on success to grow ridership by investing in arterial BRT where people use transit the most, advancing equity and reducing regional disparities in access to opportunities, balancing expanded arterial BRT investment with available resources, and growing a network that connects transit-supportive land uses and supports all-day, all-purpose travel. So those 4 goals based on policy direction, conversations with stakeholders, and some engagement we've done in this first round really are weighted equally. There's sort of stronger interest in some versus others, but really a lot of that input kind of balances out, and we felt a balanced approach to these 4 goals is the right approach to guide our work going forward. So those weights will really guide or have guided the weight that we applied to our screening criteria, and we'll continue to do that throughout the rest of this project and evaluation as well. A reminder of the screening criteria that we applied to this work. So we covered a draft of these back in April and did some refining based on feedback from other partners and other stakeholders, and then applied these criteria here. So there are 2 to 4 criteria corresponding to each of our four goals. At a high level, build on success to grow ridership is really uses criteria that are based on existing ridership and productivity on existing local routes. We also look at transit demand in the corridor, thinking about transit market areas as a way to indicate where do we expect transit ridership to be highest, independent of the level of service that might be in that particular area. Under advancing equity and reducing regional disparities, we're looking at historically disadvantaged populations, both living along a particular corridor, as well as using transit on the local service that's in that corridor. Oftentimes, those two things align, but sometimes they don't, and it's important for us to understand both who is riding the bus in a particular corridor and who lives along a corridor to understand the full picture of who would benefit from this style of investment. We also look at essential destinations in a corridor. So these are really important destinations that provide a public service or another community service, libraries, community centers, SNAP retailers, those types of things. Down to balancing investment, we're really looking at where are we planning to be making investment in frequency and in service. and sort of trying to understand how much of a lift would it be to upgrade the frequency in a particular corridor to arterial BRT levels of service, to have an idea of the resource requirement in that corridor. Finally, looking at bus delay in a corridor, as well as thinking about the efficiency of arterial BRT in a particular corridor. And then lastly, connecting transit supportive land uses, really looking at future uses. So we have some screening criteria that are really oriented around the existing condition and several that are oriented around the future condition as well, to get a sense for where are communities wanting to make the types of investments in land uses that really support success on this style of service. So that brings us to the results. This graph shows each individual corridor ranked by their total screening score out of 100. And don't worry, we'll get to a map of this as well, so you don't have to have every corridor memorized in terms of name there. So out of 100, and then the individual colors correspond to how well that particular corridor did in the specific goals out of 25 there. So that all that adds up to their score out of 100. Our goal is to identify 8 to 10 candidate corridors that would move forward to the next step in our process, where we'd be evaluating those in more detail. Looking at sort of in that 8 to 10 corridor range, looking for natural breaks in the screening results, we see that at 10 corridors. So we are advancing 10 corridors to the next step, where and that line on this map here, on this chart here, shows those corridors above the line are the ones advancing to the next step. Those below the line would not be advancing further in our process. However, many of these corridors do have planned frequency improvements in the next coming years, and we're always looking to partner with our roadway partners to be making local bus stop improvements on corridors that are good candidates for future investment as well. So this is the map of candidate corridors. So we've seen this one before. And then here is what that map of advanced corridors looks like. So those 10 advancing forward relative to that candidate corridors here. Again, the labels correspond to alphabetical order. They're not, they don't correspond to the screening rank. So it's just listed 1 through 10 in alphabetical order here. On this map, we've also added in color the existing and planned metro network investments to really help give us a full picture of where are these types of investments occurring throughout our region, so we can see how do these 10 corridors relate to our broader metro network. And then this map just adds the transit market areas as an underlay here. So it's the same map as previous, but we can see sort of in market areas 1 and 2, where do these 10 corridors advancing relate to each other? Where do those corridors relate to our existing and planned metro investments? And where do all of those relate to where we expect transit demand in our region to be the highest, really, in transit market areas 1 and 2? Moving on to our next steps here, where we've got some upcoming outreach and engagement. So we are really kicking off our comment period beginning tomorrow with with this meeting, and then going through the end of August, so ending that September 1st. We're really, seeking feedback on the results of this screening process and those advanced corridors, asking questions like, which corridor is supported by you the most, which corridor is kind of best for your community and your region, and sort of trying to get a sense of preferences there to help us, along with technical evaluation, really sort of understand how to select the next several corridors. Some key activities we'll be using to help support that engagement. We'll have an online interactive map and comment form, so that'll allow folks to really dig in and zoom in on sort of exactly where they might get on and off the bus, and sort of how these 10 corridors might relate to their travel, other things that they're interested in. And then really we're trying to meet our riders where they're at. So we are hosting a series of pop-up events where we'll have a few informational boards, as well as kind of an opportunity for folks to provide feedback on this material at transit centers, at major bus stops, at other sort of important points throughout our corridor, throughout our transit network. We'll also be getting onboard buses to make sure that riders are aware of this, targeting the corridors that are advancing, but making sure that we're getting out to get a wide swath of rider perspectives. Connecting with our neighborhood organization and community partners, both those relationships that we have directly, as well as getting support from our municipal stakeholders as well to kind of help build on those contact lists and spread the word. And then, of course, using the full suite of communications tools that Metro Transit and the council has, including newsletters, rider alerts, and other tools. So our next steps, obviously, that the seeking feedback on those corridors to advance, both from a partner agency review perspective. So we've had a series of meetings with our core partners, sharing these results and getting their feedback as well. And then also that public engagement I mentioned. We'll also be refining and developing these corridors selected to advance. So now that we have a more manageable set of 10, we can really be digging in on these in a little bit more detail, identifying concept station locations, potential local service changes if needed, and doing some other more detailed work to help us support that detailed evaluation. And then finally, a little bit further down the road, but we'll be beginning that detailed technical evaluation of these corridors as well, following these steps. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions.
Great, thank you, Kyle. Any questions? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kyle. On the agenda that is printed, there is a note, a bullet for additional materials. Are there additional materials, or am I looking at something wrong?
I'm not certain. Mr. Chair, council members, this is I think these slides are the materials that I.
Okay. All right. I did have some other questions, and that is not questions and comments. That's related to the criteria for alignment and coordinating. That's obviously really good to align with roadway projects and other transit networks, as well as plan networks. I think what makes this BRT planning process even stronger is that there's Network Now, which allows us another opportunity to connect communities that we didn't have before, and allows us, looking at this map here that's showing on the screen, to have more balance, as was mentioned, as far as our expanded investment throughout the corridor, including north, east, and south and west. And then I did have a question about the feedback for agency partners. Typically, what type of agency partners do we connect with about BRT expansion?
Mr. Chair, council members, so we engage very closely with the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Hennepin, Ramsey County, Washington County, and then as well, we basically reach out to all of the cities and counties within our metro area to sort of invite them to join as well, and they do on their interests. So we've had several dedicated meetings with the city of Richfield and other cities as well.
Great, thank you.
There's Councilmember Jenkins.
So when we're doing community engagement on the 10 advancing corridors, do we also have information and do we work with the communities on other changes that would happen if this line was approved? So if there was a reduction in service on another line or the elimination of another line, is that part of that community engagement as well?
Mr. Chair, council members, that is, and we develop at this point concept levels of service. We're quite far out from actually implementing these. So we want to try to give folks the picture of something that could happen. But then, of course, we do continue to refine those potential local service changes, up until till closer as we coordinate with the individual corridors.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Barb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. More of a comment. Just want to say, really excited to see this going. This is something, obviously, has been very important to me. You've heard me talk about it a lot, about the ABRT program. And although neither Kyle nor I paid Liam to be here tonight, it was a wonderful moment to say, hey, this is really, this matters to people and to their lives, and the real kind of impact that we can make. And knowing that you can go out and on these high-frequency corridors, and then bus is going to be coming in 10 minutes if you can't make your bus, and all of that, just having that frequency, that reliability means so much to people. And I think, you know, to see kind of this next step in this process as we keep going it's just really nice to see kind of the build out on the map of how all of these things start to connect. And I will just sort of end my comments with, we're almost halfway through the alphabet, so let's sort of keep rolling with this, but it's very exciting. And thank you, Kyle and team, for all the work you do.
Yeah, great. I totally agree. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Barber, for all of that. I concur. And I am just, really excited about this entire process. I remember when it was Network Next, and then we had to do the pivot as we were coming through COVID, and it's Network Now. And just really looking at our leadership around our transit planning, I just have so much confidence in what you're doing and really appreciate your hard work. And I love to see the layers coming into play. And, I look at Mark, who's now come off tab, and for those of us that have served on tab, what's exciting is to see what is coming, because everybody else who doesn't have a line on the map yet is rising up as well, right? And so every time we can get more service out there and get the plan that serves the region, the more opportunity there is for growth throughout the region. So I am just really excited about this, and just want to thank everybody for their hard work.
Thank you. Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Kyle, and to everyone who's worked on this, all the teams. It's really amazing. I agree with what's been said. Councilmember Johnson, as someone who served on TAB for 12 years, starting in 2001, 2002, I couldn't even have imagined a map that looked like this back then, so some 20 years ago, whatever that was. And so it's super exciting. And one of the things that came up during the transit policy work group was, we're picking the 3 lines, right, JKL. And so we had this large, whatever it was, 19 down to 10. And once you pick 3, and there's always changing conditions throughout the region. And so, you have to have some certainty, here's the next 3, but then we'll be able to continue to evaluate corridors as land use changes throughout the metro. And so I think that's really exciting. And so, but I did have one question for you, Kyle, and that is on the slide that discusses the 4-step process. It calls it the 4-step 2025 plan update process, and it gets to that final prioritization of the JK and L. And I assume that means it's in 2025. And if you already said this, I apologize that I missed it. But is that the timeline to get to that prioritization? Is that this year?
Mr. Chair, council members, that's correct. So our goal is to complete this work this year. I think probably the last action of the council takes might be in the first quarter of 2026, okay. But that's our goal. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Cameron.
Yeah.
Then Barber.
I can address some of the timing questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So especially related to why we're doing some of this, there's an upcoming regional solicitation. So, and we're in the process right now of redefining, kind of how we're going to roll that next version of the solicitation out. As many of you know, for the last few cycles, we've had a $25 million set aside for ABRT program in the regional solicitation. As you all know, I was absent last week for the retreat, but it was because we were discussing that. And I think there's still broad support for the $25 million set aside, but actually maybe increasing that to $35 million given the size and changes in the projects themselves. But it's really important, I think, that, it's a cooperative effort. I mean, we set the vision and all of this, but TAB has also put it out as a really important priority. And so we need it done in early 26 to get it.
Excellent points. Angela.
So on that, kind of 2 comments. One related to Councilmember Lilligren's comments on timing, and that is that some of the screening tools that we're using are very much timing dependent. I think about the balancing existing investment, that ties in directly to what our current network system looks like. And so I hope that this is an iterative process. If we're, as we're going line by line, that we're revisiting those screening tools, not just as we are doing it this initial round, but then as we are coming closer, that we are revisiting those, because some of those will shift over time. And so just making sure that it doesn't have to be revisiting the whole process, but just verifying that those screening criteria are still meeting that same standard. And then the other piece, and I feel sorry for Liam because he will be quoted for the next 2 years in this building.
Did we record that? I think we did.
One of the things that was highlighted was the difference in time that it took. And so part of when we're looking at the map, what is really important about the B line is that it undercuts it intersects some of our, sorry, not undercut. It intersects a lot of our existing lines. And so opportunities where we can do that and connect some of our BRT and our light rail system and have those intersection points, I think also help reduce that time. And we can promise all the incredible things that Liam has gone through and his self-transformation with those. So.
Thanks. Hold on. Yeah, go ahead. Councilmember Lindstrom, then Chambliss.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. One thing I'm reminded of when I'm looking at this list is the last time we did this with F, G, and H, and looking at those 10 lines, the ultimate lines that were selected were not 1, 2, and 3 that scored in the top 10. It was like 2, 4, and 7, or 3, 5, and 8, or whatever it was. So you talked a little bit about that, the next level of technical analysis and making sure it lines up with upcoming road projects, et cetera. And I'm wondering if you were to give any advice for Lowry or 66th Street or Broadway or any of the lines. Certainly, I suspect it'd be make sure that you are actively engaged in the public participation process. But for those champions of any one of these lines, is there anything else that they could be doing, should be doing to put their best foot forward?
Mr. Chair, council members, yeah, it's a great, a great question. And I think where we tackle that is really active engagement with the roadway authorities along these corridors. And with Lowry in particular, Hennepin County has been a really great partner with us. You're of course aware that there's an active project on a portion of Lowry Avenue right now. And, some of our work has been with them historically to, be aware that this corridor had been identified as a potential candidate corridor previously, and so that we should be thoughtful about that and making sure not to preclude arterial BRT. And so I think continuing to be a good partner and continuing to be proactive in identifying roadway projects and how we can try to align those roadway projects in those concurrent years is a way to help make sure that a corridor is basically ready for arterial BRT. And then that paired with the screening and the evaluation technical analysis that we'll be doing is really how the corridors sort of come together. So we want to make sure that transit need and that transit justification is really there, as well as meeting our partners with where they're at and having them meet us with where we're at too, and kind of advancing those corridors.
And Ryan, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with exactly what Kyle said. He said it really nicely. And so I think the other way I would just add to it is we need corridors that are going to get done on the timelines we're trying to establish to continue to build faith in both the product we're trying to deliver to the region and to make the case for continued expansion into what comes next. To do that, as you look at those lines, if there are things going on at the local government level that sometimes happen through processes where something bogs down or it's not quite clear what's going to happen in that corridor, that's a very big flag for us in terms of making sure we can deliver on the timelines here. And so every local community knows if there's something here on any of their corridors that could be, oh, we got to work through this at the council level or something before it can move forward. Those are the spots that we're going to be very tight on identifying, because frankly, it's better to wait till the next go around than it is to bog down in the corridor that can't go for 10 years. And that's part of the promise of the continued build out is, if not now, hopefully next time, and we can align things. I think is just a really important dynamic going forward.
Good point. Councilmember Chambliss, then Tony.
Yeah, just real quickly, in terms of the evaluation and prioritization process, I know that in the next step, we'll be taking a look at the top 10 and then the top 6 to the top 3, or however you want to do that. But I know that there's usually a grid where there's criteria that's listed, and based on that location, it says high, medium, or low in terms of the scoring. So that'll be the kind of like the next step, I would think. But one thing that I also was thinking about as far as what's been coming up a lot, and that the balance and the alignment and the connectedness are connecting transit centers, connecting to transit centers or major hubs, and working with the stakeholder cities so that they can talk about, give their take on what that means in terms of having those transit corridors connected and where the big ones are, in each of the areas. Like, for example, in Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, there's a Brooklyn Center transit corridor, which is a major hub. This map isn't really showing where all the major hubs are, but I know that's part of the planning process.
Great. Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. This is very, very exciting, and I am so glad this process is moving forward. And while I am so glad to see the process advancing with the criteria that you've set, and the timelines that we've talked about, and all the connecting intersections of work that have to be done, the identification of these corridors by the end of the year, I am also knowing that we are running parallel to a process for West 7th Street that has put it on a different arena for consideration. I know there will be, as you go into community engagement and as you are working with the jurisdictions, a lot of questions hanging out there about that particular corridor and how it interacts with or does not interact with this. Can you share how you're preparing for those kinds of comments and questions and challenges as we go into this period? And again, understanding that we're not on the same planes today with this work.
Mr. Chair, council members, yeah, so that's obviously, it's a line on the map that doesn't show up on our map here. And I think a key reason for that is to avoid trying to create some type of parallel process in public that would create confusion, create questions about, well, I heard about this new West 7th corridor. Is that also part of this process? Are these things totally different? So we are keeping these processes separate for right now to let each of them kind of play out and to let that West 7th planning process play out in the way that it needs to, and to let the arterial BRT plan update process play out the way that it needs to. Certainly, outcomes from that process could and could inform each other, basically, as we're kind of moving down each of these processes, and certainly can flag that. I think that's a good call out to maybe flag as just proactively being able to link back to other, this project. We do identify that in sort of as a corridor that is not part of our part of this process proactively in our kind of in our screening document that we created these 17 corridors and refer back to that other process. So in terms of preparation, our goal is to really try to direct people where they can be participating and to keep people as up to date as they can and make sure that kind of comments that come into one are understood, but that they ultimately go to the right place.
And
Go ahead.
I really appreciate just hearing you iterate that because I know it will become a part of the discussion. And it is helpful for you to identify the manner in which each process is being held because, of course, with Met Council's clear participation and leadership in both, it will make a difference in terms of our not confusing, but holding a respect for the two processes in place. So thank you.
Greg, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just one last point on this. This kind of ties a little bit to the earlier question Councilmember Lindstrom had about, readiness scores. And so I'll just add two thoughts on it. I mean, one is we need a clear path forward to have it be considered as a thing that we could actually even consider here or elsewhere within the broader context of where things go. And we're hopeful about that. There continue to be conversations, but there's been 40 years of conversation too. And so at one moment this is going to go, and we're going to continue to communicate that with our partners and would ask for your help in doing that as we go. I think the other part that makes it tricky for this process alone, and I appreciate the way you addressed it and how we're being cognizant, the full roadway rebuild need for that particular corridor needs an answer to be able to figure out where it fits in this context. And that's really the question in front of us all now. And I want to appreciate the team and Nick and the broader team for continuing to sit down with all the partners right now to try to answer that question. So when we're back, hopefully later this year, there's an answer of how it does fit in the broader ecosystem of moving forward.
Thank you.
Councilmember Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, but I just want to say thank you to the Kylie to bring this important presentation. I don't know the timing. If it was coincident when we get today a great feedback from the public. So thank you for bringing this very important information. And also, as the Councilmember Barbara earlier mentioned, that we are already halfway to the alphabetical letter. So just wondering when we run out the letters, what we gonna do? Thank you very much.
Name them after council members.
Great idea.
Or Liam.
Liam. Yeah, a future council member. Any other comments, questions? All right, well, Kyle, thank you so much, and we really look forward to, as we get through this process. Every time we listen to Matt Schroeder talk about populations, Sue Vento says has a particular interest in those aging population, and since she's not here, I have an interest, so welcome, Matt.
Mr. Chair, council members, I actually have a confession to make. I did pay Liam to be here. So you're welcome. No, I would love to take credit for what he said, but no, I did take a beeline. It was great, but yeah, he put it way better than I could have. So that was a great surprise to hear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am here today to talk about the population estimates. We just released our estimates for 2024 last week. These are, I'm grateful to hear that Councilmember Vento is interested in the aging of the population. They can seem, though, like a dry and academic subject, but they really do have a lot of implications for our work in land use planning and housing and transportation planning, as we just saw. Please don't ask me about what those implications are. I'm not at all qualified to discuss those, but I know I can tell you that there are implications as context. So I want to start today by talking a bit about the estimates, what they are, why we do them, and how we do them. I'll talk about the main takeaway from the estimates, which is that compared with the previous decade, the 2010 to 2020 period, our growth has been slower than it was. And at the same time, it's also been less geographically balanced. That is, more of the population growth in the region has been going to the developing edge of the region than to as opposed to being more evenly distributed across the region as it was in the previous decade. I want to talk about some of the factors underlying that slower growth, but also add some nuance that I hope will caution against one conclusion that you could draw from the less geographic balance. So I want to start, though, by distinguishing the estimates from a couple other sources of demographic data that we published. One of those is the decennial census. This is done every 10 years. The goal is to get a complete count of people, as complete a count as the Census Bureau is able to get. But really, that's the goal, not to figure out the characteristics of the population, but really the number. For the purpose of apportioning congressional seats and redrawing political districts within states. The second of those is the American Community Survey, or ACS. There we do get a really rich portrait of the population, income, education, veteran status, disability status, and so on. And from those we can get characteristics of the population, like the poverty rate and the median household income. And this is really meant to be an up-to-date rich portrait as well, so it's carried out every year. Both of these enter into the population estimates. They're very important inputs, but the estimates are kind of, I guess, conceptually a blend of those two, in that, like the census, its goal is not to really paint a portrait of the population so much as to get an approximate number of people. But like the ACS, it's meant to be more up-to-date than the decennial census. So that is what we're doing here. We are looking back, in this case, to 2024, and I want to distinguish these from the forecasts, which these three things influence, along with many other things, but those look into future decades. And because we're currently working on those forecasts for the next round of comprehensive planning, I wanted to make sure that that distinction was clear, because we're talking today about estimates, not the forecasts. This is really a collaboration of many governmental entities. State law gives us the responsibility for preparing estimates for the 7-county Twin Cities region. The State Demographic Center does them for the other 80 counties in Minnesota. But then local governments have a really important role too. We rely on their data that they give us to create estimates that are, I think, more refined than what we could do without them. As well, they also review the preliminary estimates that we send out, and I'll talk about that on the next slide, and help us refine them too. So we're grateful for their contributions too. State law also lays out the process that we do these by, and about a month ago, actually, gosh, almost 2 months ago now, we sent these preliminary estimates out to communities, and in the interest of transparency, we also included detailed reports that provide all the inputs and the calculations for the estimates. After that, local governments had a few weeks to look at the estimates, compare them with their own data, and if they thought it was warranted, submit comments and challenges, asking us to take a second look at them. And this year we heard from 12 communities. 6 of those comments were really more just clarifying how the estimates are calculated and answering questions. In 5 other cases, communities provided data that really called for a revision, and then another one resulted in no revision. And then last week, we sent these estimates over to the state government for use in allocating things like local government aid, MnDOT's state aid for local transportation, and so on. Before getting into the nature of how the population is changing, I think it's really useful to understand where these estimates come from and how they're calculated. I would love to have detailed data on where people are being born and where they're dying and where people are moving to and from, but we don't have access to that. But we can use what we do have a pretty good sense of to estimate the population, and that is housing units. We have the complete count, again, as complete a count as the Census Bureau is able to get, of housing units from the 2020 census. And we conduct a building permit survey every year to hear from communities about all of the changes to the housing stock that they've issued building permits for, not just new construction, but also demolitions and conversions from commercial uses and so on. So we feel pretty good that we have a good sense of the number of housing units in each community. And from there, we can use what we know about those different kinds of housing units to first estimate how many of those housing units are occupied, that is, how many households there are. And we can also estimate how many people on average live in each of these households to get to how many people live in households. Not all the residents of our region live in households. About 61,000 of them live in group quarters facilities. These are places like nursing homes and college dormitories and group homes. So adding those together, we get to the total population. But the color shading here is deliberate. The green shades indicate things that we have a pretty good idea of based on the census and our surveys. We also do a group quarters survey every year. The blue boxes are things that we really need to estimate based on the best available data that we have, but there's, I guess, yeah, that's more of an estimate than the other things. As I mentioned, we have the growth that we've experienced so far this decade has been both less and less geographically balanced than it was in the previous decade. And so to set that up, here is the population in every census year going back to 1900. So all the way on the right there, you can see that we had about 3.163 million people in 2020, which was up about 313,500, or 11% from 2010. Our estimate for 2024, I'll talk about housing units and households a bit later, but to focus on people for now, was about 3.248 million people. So an increase of about 85,000 people, or 2.7% from 2010. And just comparing that to the previous slide, thinking about how we added 313,500 people over 10 years in the previous decade, but we're almost halfway through this decade, and to have added only 85,000 people about really shows you the slower growth. And to make that clearer, this chart is showing, breaking that growth down by decade. So you can see all the way on the right there that in this decade, we've added about 21,000 people per year, in contrast to last decade when it was more like 31,000 per year. So less, on average, annual growth per decade. Still more definitely than previous decades like the 1930s and the 1970s, but still well off the pace of previous decades like the 80s and 90s and the 2010s as well. Looking at where that growth is going in the region, that's really where we see the less geographic balance than we used to. So darker shades of green here show communities that have added the most people since 2020. Darker shades of gold indicate communities that have lost the most people since 2020, according to our estimates. And Minneapolis is one of those top 10 cities. Those are the top 10 fastest growing cities are labeled on the map. But Minneapolis is one of those. Otherwise, they are on that developing edge of the region. Rogers, Dayton, Corcoran, Blaine, Woodbury, places like that are really on the developing edge. And when we look at percent growth since 2020, that really shows, I think, the pattern more starkly, which is that when we're looking at the highest growth rates, it really is, you do kind of see that ring around the region, the ring of the developing edge of the region. Looking at this map against last decade really shows you that contrast too. So this is the same map, growth between 2010 and 2020, average annual growth per year. So flipping back and forth, you can really see how there is more brownish gold on this map versus the previous decade, but also how the shading of this map is a lot more even, less sharp distinctions than there is on this current map. And just to put some numbers to that general impression from the maps, this chart is showing when you add up all the population change within each of these sets of community designations from the Imagine 2050 plan, this is what you come up with. And again, looking at that rightmost column, from the bottom to the top, the urban edge, suburban edge, and rural service area. You can definitely see, in contrast to the 2010s, how the suburban edge communities, like the ones that I mentioned, are capturing a lot more of the region's growth than they had. we're still, seeing growth in the urban center and urban and suburban communities, and that was not always the case in previous decades. So all parts of the region, all different kinds of communities in the region are still growing, just not all as quickly as they had in the previous decade.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is wonderful, thank you. But to just ask an obvious question. So I've got suburban communities and there's lots going on, but they do fully develop. So they're going to start to slow, and then they move into redevelopment where they might start to pick up again. So isn't there kind of that natural cycle? It's, that you are going to fully develop, and that's just the slowing of growth, right? And then you see it push out because, hey, guess what? There's more land available. Mm-hmm. So is there some norm assumptions built into this, or are we to assume? I'm just trying to understand. When we see trends where oh no, it's not growing as much anymore, but that's normal, right?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I guess I would say that, yes, to some extent, that's normal, but I think a lot of this is also driven by housing production. And even in Minneapolis, and St. Paul, which you, I guess, could have called built out, though I'm not an expert in this terminology and land use and how all that plays out together. We still saw a lot of redevelopment, an amazing amount of new housing built in Minneapolis, especially during the 2010s. And so, to some extent, I guess you could say that this is kind of a function of how much land there is to develop, but it also interacts with where the demand for housing is and where different kinds of households want to move. So it's a complicated picture. But yeah, certainly the development stages of different communities play into it.
And if I may, and just looking at over time, you have surges in birth rates. So whenever there seemed to be a war, then there was a baby boom, right? Literally the baby boom generation. And then, I don't know, but there are studies, and we're seeing now that the baby boomers' kids are not having birth rates. In fact, we talk about that, birth rates are down. Mm-hmm. And so, again, but if you look back, you can almost see the spike and the dip and the spike and the dip. So is that a predictor then of the future? And is it based on some other outside of data? There's obviously things impacting birth rates and lifestyles, and income. So does that factor in, or are we just really more on the data that we're studying and we're not making any assumptions that we're drawing in that we don't have access to?
Those are, there are all these broader demographic changes in the region that I'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay. That definitely play into that too. And I'm glad you mentioned the economy too. You can look at the 2000s, which was really a tale of two halves of the decade, where you've got the boom years in the first half of the decade with lots of housing construction, and then the Great Recession for the second half of that decade that really suppressed growth. And for that reason, it's the 2000s, in which the economy was not doing as well on average as during the 1990s. Yeah, that's a big part of the reason that it had substantially less growth. But yeah, lots of different trends happening, and I think and hope that some of those questions that I can put some numbers to them in the following slides.
Okay, thank you.
So getting to those questions of why has growth slowed, just to remind us of those three main levers that I'll talk about in sequence. The three main things here that go into our formula are housing production, occupancy rates / vacancy rates, and household sizes. So when we look at housing production, that is not the culprit here. This is showing the number of housing units in each year going back to 2010, according to the census years and our own estimates. And the thing I want to highlight here is that between 2020 and 2024, sort of the past 4 years leading up to this 2024 estimate, we've added about 21,000 housing units per year in an average year. And that is almost double the number of housing units we added per year on average in the previous decade. So housing production is continuing at a rapid clip. So that is not what is leading to the slowdown in growth. What we are seeing, though, is that there are more vacant units, especially in the multifamily sector. So we've added more than 84,000 housing units since 2020, but a little over 64,000 households. So essentially, on net, there are 20,000 more vacant units than there were in 2020, such that our occupancy rate fell from 95.7% in 2020 to 94.5% in 2024.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So if I may, and not to go into a long thing about it, but I mean, that goes counter to what we are hearing certainly at the legislature from the advocates, that there's the housing shortage and, you know, there are their reasons for it. But when you look here, it doesn't seem to bear out the case that we have a terrible shortage of units and all the pressures and things that we worry about in CDC. And so I think that's interesting, because this is the first time I'm seeing in our data that it's like actually our production is up and growth is down and vacancies are up, and which usually means that rents will ease off a bit too. So that narrative based in data just seems very different than the crisis that we are hearing about, and I guess we are addressing it too here, certainly, but I find there's a juxtaposition there. So I'm going to really dig in and really appreciate understanding this more, because I think we just have to, I'm just trying to reconcile the two narratives, I guess, in my head.
And it may be the devil is in the details, so we'll hear more. Councilmember Chambliss, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think there's a slide that we haven't gotten to that talks about the oversimplification, not to do that. And one of the and the reason why I brought that slide up already is because this isn't talking about housing demand. It's just talking about the housing supply. So if you're looking at what some of the economists are concerned about, maybe they're concerned about keeping up with the housing demand, even though our production is steadily increasing, where's the demand side? So, but this kind of presentation brings up all those kinds of questions.
Or demand in certain income levels. We
Right.
don't have enough.
Because growth is down.
We don't have enough affordable
But demand is up.
production versus regular.
Right.
Yeah, Councilmember.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I wanted to make, Mr. Chair. And then also that, you know, the different types of housing units too, whether we are talking about single-family homes versus multi-family units, you know, what I think separating out those is also really important. And then, you know, one other thing that I just wanted to highlight as a background, because I don't think it's going to touch on this in the slides, is that much of our growth trajectory within the region is based on foreign-born population growth rather than birth rates. And so, you know, as we're thinking about this data, to also think about the fact that that number is likely going down as we're implementing more restrictive immigration policies, and so we should anticipate that as well as we're looking at the future growth of our region.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair and council members, I'm really glad you brought all those points up. There are, I guess, two things I guess I would say. One is, as Councilmember Cameron just mentioned, and Chambliss too, there's the question of different affordability levels too. Vacancy rates are a lot lower so occupancy rates are a lot higher in what some people call Class C apartment buildings, the ones that are older and tend to be more affordable. The ones that, the higher vacancy rates are in those more recently constructed, more expensive, higher rent areas. And those, so yeah, they're even though this might seem on its face to argue against that idea of a housing crisis, it really does, play out differently in different sectors of the housing market. The other thing I would say is that, and this kind of points to one of the shortcomings of the estimates and the fact that we are calculating these for April 1st of 2024. We're now more than a year away from that. And so we have seen, as I think will be the subject of a presentation later this year, a pretty dramatic slowdown in the permitting of multifamily units especially. And so as a result, and as I think I'll mention a bit later, the vacancy rates among multifamily units are dropping again. So there is a lot of nuance behind these numbers that isn't always clear, but I really appreciate your bringing that up. That was kind of on my mind too, as something to mention. So thank you for reminding me. So at the same time that few of our housing units are occupied, households are also getting smaller. So again, here we've added more than 5% to our 2020 total of households, but the number of people in households has increased by just 2.7%. And so our average household size has fallen from 2.503 in 2020 to 2.445 in 2024, which, as Councilmember Johnson pointed out earlier, has something to do with falling birth rates. But to kind of point to one of the big patterns behind this, I'll say these numbers come from a different data source, so we can't, directly compare them to that 2.445 number. But you can kind of break that overall number down and see that in 2020, we had 0.53 minor children under 18 per household and 0.22 adult children, 18 or more, per household. By 2024, as that tail end of the millennial generation has left home, those were down to 0.5 and 0.2 respectively. So as we're seeing children leave home, whether to go off to school or to form their own households, that is, the increasing number of empty nest households is a big dynamic here too. But yeah, getting to that question of natural population change, births are down and deaths are up. In the 5 years preceding 2020, we were seeing about 39,000 people being born every year in the region. Since then, that's down to about 36,000, so 3,000 fewer births per year. And death rates are up too, thanks in large part to COVID, but also to the aging of our population. So we're seeing about 3,400 more deaths per year on average. So when you look at how much our population is changing due only to births and deaths, that's lower by 6,400 people per year. So that's a big chunk of the decline as well. But yeah, as I mentioned, I do want to caution against the very human tendency to want to simplify things into an easier to grasp story. And this article actually came out last year, but it's a good example of what I mean, which is that the headline here reads, "Minnesota's urban core boomed over the past decade. Momentum is now shifting back to the suburbs." And this article did not I think oversimplify things, but again, it's like we want to bring things into our mind and something that's easy to understand. And so it's easy to, I think, jump from that statement to something like all cities in the urban core are rapidly losing population and all edge cities are rapidly gaining. So to add some nuance here, I want to emphasize that most cities are still gaining households, the number of housing units that are occupied. So again, this, I guess, map looks a bit more like the population change map from earlier in the presentation. Darker shades of green here are higher growth rates in households. And again, darker shades of gold are higher percent loss in households. But Minneapolis and St. Paul, especially you can see that in this map, when you look at the number of households that have been gained in each city, Minneapolis and St. Paul are actually the biggest gainers there, as well as cities across the region. I mean, you've got older suburbs like Edina and Bloomington, as well as Lakeville down there. So household growth, I think, is more evenly spread across the region. And that really does get to questions of demand for housing and where new housing is needed and what kind of new housing. But it's, I think, helpful to keep that in mind when looking at change in the region. It's just that it's not that cities are losing households. It's just that those households are not don't have as many people as they used to. And part of that too, I guess, to Councilmember Johnson's point earlier, part of that has to do with what's being developed. I mean, so much of this construction has been in the multifamily sector, and that those tend to have smaller households than single-family homes that are more common on the edge of the region. We also, though, can look at estimates at a finer grain scale. And I guess, as much as we try to disaggregate data by race and ethnicity and disability status and many other equity-relevant characteristics, I think it's also important to disaggregate geographically, too, and look within cities. So we also produce estimates for areas below the city level, in this case, census tracts. So this map is showing the percent change in population from before, same map, just zoomed into the edge of to the core of the region, so that it's easier to see the change in population within census tracts. And so, again, just flipping back and forth between these, you can see how just looking at those citywide, that citywide growth obscures a lot of change, a lot of differences across space within cities. So there's a much more, I don't know if it's quite a checkerboard pattern, but it's definitely a lot less smooth than this map looks like.
Mr. Chair, just
Yeah.
real quick. And then in the cities that are all just one color, are they all a census tract just because they don't have dense population? Is that their census tract is their full city? You'll see some communities divided a lot by census tract, and then you'll see others like in my community, Dayton, Rogers, Corcoran, Medina, they're just all one color. Is it one census tract, or there's a whole bunch of them there, but they're all just the same color?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, some communities do have only one census tract in them, but others, I think Dayton is one of those, but others like Rogers do have multiple tracts, and you can kind of see that, that faint white line separating those two areas of Rogers all the way up in the northwestern corner of this map. Okay. They're not always easy to see in the rest of the map, but
that's fine. Thank you.
So yeah, again, I think, useful to look within cities and see that even those that are not growing as fast as they had in the past still have pockets that are growing very, very fast. Mm-hmm. And so looking quickly, I mean, as I mentioned, these estimates are for 2024, but, the estimate date of April 1st, 2025, that will be calculated for next year has already passed. So thinking ahead a bit to what those might look like, some things might argue for ongoing and perhaps faster growth. Death rates should continue to drop as we kind of emerge from those the years of the peak of the pandemic. And as I mentioned before, there's also been a strong increase in multifamily occupancy. As I think all those new apartments that have been built are finally like the demand is really being absorbed there. Other things argue for slower growth, slower than it has been. As I mentioned, too, there's been an ongoing decline in multifamily permitting, and that, I think, will be a subject of a later presentation later this year. But yeah, as Councilmember Cameron noted, we are seeing a lot of changes in immigration policy at the federal level. And between those restrictions and active deportations of people who are already here, that will probably start to play out in the estimates too. And just a quick number on that. Census Bureau's estimates are not, again, comparable to our own, but the most recent set of estimates that they put out showed growth in the population of about 70,000 through migration from outside the country, compared with natural growth, births minus deaths, of I think somewhere around 54,000. I may be getting those numbers wrong, but the pattern is clear that international migration contributed more to our growth over the past 4 years than births and deaths did on net. So that is, a pretty important trend. And I think there was actually an article in MinPost last week sometime with the state demographer talking about how as our population ages and birth rates continue to decline, migration is going to be an increasingly important determinant of what our population change looks like in the future. And then too, there's always the possibility of a recession and a cooling homeownership market, though, to be honest, people have been talking about this for several years now, and we haven't really seen it, but it's still there. And then there are just a couple of wild cards that, it's always possible that we'll see another, pandemic or perhaps a natural disaster, things that we can't foresee that would really change things. There's also the potential effects of climate change. Perhaps people will migrate here from more wildfire-prone regions or hurricane-prone regions, for example, though that's probably a trend to observe over the course of many, many years and decades, not just over the course of like 5 years. So just some thoughts. I mean, it's hard to be talking about trends going only up to 2024 when we've already had a year since then. So just kind of wanted to bring that up to date a bit. But that is, what I have today, and I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Valuable conversation. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if you could go forward to your last slide so everybody sees that you have a link to more information.
Oh, yes. metrocouncil.org/population estimates. That is the...
This is always a fascinating presentation for me, and I've been digging through the numbers for a couple of days because I do find it very helpful to understand. Everybody should make sure that they click on that link and then go to the detailed population estimates, because it has breakdowns by the whole region and county and individual communities on the occupancy rates and whatnot, and how much has been constructed of all of the different kinds of household units. And I think that that's very important for us to understand. We keep being told by the legislature and whatnot that the missing middle is the key, but when you look at the region as a whole, the duplex, triplex, quadplex homes have only a 88% occupancy rate, the lowest of all of the kinds of housing in the region. And actually, we're losing them. Some have been torn down since 2020 as well. But when you look at single family detached for the whole region, it's almost 97% occupancy. Townhomes are a little over 95% occupancy, and multifamily is a little over 91% occupancy. So there's big differences in the different types of housing, and you can drill that down to the communities in your district and whatnot to really understand the housing market. The one thing that I found fascinating is the Census Bureau considers second homes and short-term rentals as being vacant. And so it would be good for us to have information on how many, if it's possible, to have information on how many of those there actually are in the region, so that we have a better idea of what our real vacancy rate is. And I'm sure that varies dramatically by community as well. I mean, when I first started on the council, there was one council member who had a house in the suburbs and then had an apartment in Minneapolis so that he could go to sporting events and stuff and have somewhere to stay. So technically his Minneapolis apartment was vacant, but it wasn't actually vacant. So there's just so many great things to learn with all of this. And I encourage all of you to take your deeper dive into the information, because there's a lot there.
Really helpful. Councilmember Jenkins.
So earlier on in the presentation, when you talked about the spatial balance, it's one of the only times you talked about the rural service edge, suburban edge, and so forth from the 70s through the 20s. I'll let you get to that right there. My question is, and this is for me, knowledge-wise, those definitions change every 10 years. So for comparison's sake of 1970s to 2020s, is the suburban edge the same communities from the 70s as it is in the 20s, or are we just, we can categorize it by category, but we can't say Lake Elmo was this in the 70s and Lake Elmo is this in 2020?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Jenkins, these do use a consistent set of cities. So the cities that are urban edge or urban today are the same cities that are that appear in this chart as urban in the 1970s. So this does kind of purify these numbers of any changing sets of communities within each of these designations.
So that clarifies it for me. It puts a big question on the data relevance then. I can't look at the 70s and 80s as a comparison because urban edge for both of those are defined by 2020 definitions. Is that correct?
That is correct, but it is the same set of cities that appears in each year. So the same cities that are currently classified as being in the cities and townships, as being in the rural service area, that same set of cities appears in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and today. So this does, take out the effect of those changing designations over time.
Okay.
Any questions on this side? Councilmember Chair.
Yeah, and I think having the graph stacked helps, because then you know that you have to look at all of the cities together, no matter how they're classified. So it might have been classified as a suburban edge in the 2010s. That's same cities in the next grouping, but it might still have a different classification. Is that what you were saying?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, yes, I think that's correct. I might have this example wrong, but the city of Anoka comes to mind. I think it, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was classified as suburban in the previous round, the Thrive MSP 2040 community designations. It's now classified, I think, as urban edge. So Anoka shows up in this chart as urban edge in each of these decades. Those actual designations might be different, but that's the general concept.
Okay. I did have a question
Yeah.
or a comment. And one thing that I was thinking about was interstate or cross-state, I don't know what you call it, immigration. I know that in I think it was the 30s to the 70s, there was the Great Black Migration from the south to the north, and you can see that in the curve of the annual population growth by decade. It would be kind of nice to know what some of those factors are that contributed over time to the growth, because it might be different during different segments of time. And then same thing that was mentioned before, immigration from other countries, and as you said, that the policies can impact that as well. And kind of digging in deeper, you can find out who is doing the immigrating and how that was impacted and what the numbers were. So that kind of tells a deeper story. But I find that aspect very interesting. Oh, and then I knew there was another one. And that was that seniors are staying in their housing longer, their single-family homes longer, due to market conditions. So that would be something interesting to look at as that, if that pattern continues.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a really fascinating, and I'm gonna ask a question, but I don't even need an answer now. I think this would be a really good cow topic because, it's something we are absolutely tasked with. We had enough questions tonight that we might need some clarification. Mm-hmm. Certainly, if you're in community development, you've probably gotten deeper. To Wendy's point, the data in here is really good. So even to just walk through that to understand, I think it's just a good idea. And then I always want to know, because gets into politics, I guess, too, but those that want to move to another state to not pay Minnesota taxes, who might live in Florida, Arizona, or wherever they go, but they still maintain a home here, so 6 months and a day somewhere else. How does that show up in the data, and how is that home counted? Because it's not two homes in the same region, it's one far, far away. So
It's vacant.
it's counted as vacant? Okay. So, it's a lot, but I think given what we do and, the advocacy role that we play in this issue, just having, even at a deeper level, being equipped so that when bills are flying at the legislature or we're working with advocates in our community, we can drill it down, at least for our districts or more generally across the region, because this is really great stuff. It's just, if we want to understand this better, it's going to take more time than this meeting. So.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Dr. Carter.
Yeah, my question was, how do we compare with other Midwestern metro areas? Is what's happening here, is that an anomaly or is it in line?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Carter, I haven't looked at that for a bit, but we have usually had one of the higher growth rates among Midwestern metros. Indianapolis, Columbus tended to be a little higher than we have, but we're higher than places like Chicago or Detroit or Cleveland or St. Louis. But yes, I think it's safe to say, though, that this is true across the country, actually, like larger metro areas, especially those in the Northeast and to some extent the Midwest, too, have, according to the Census Bureau estimates, which is all we can rely on, had much slower growth, and in some cases, earlier in the decade, population losses than in the previous decade. So we've typically been in the middle of the pack when looking at population growth, and I think that's true today as well.
Other questions? All right, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and like it's been discussed,
thank you all.
We'd like to drill in even deeper conversation. And with that, it is 5:55. We have time for just a few comments. I know that Brian Funk left the room, unfortunately. I think it's incredible the commitment we've made to long-range issues like capital maintenance, but sometimes it becomes a crisis because you've got to get it done. And I think it was amazing we actually did this work and provided mobility for those that went to the Yacht Club Festival. And despite a lot of anxiety from our friends, we actually delivered not only the transit to the festival, but they actually finished the work a day and a half early. So those, a few of us who were full of mini text change from Brian and his crew with pictures, it was kind of a phenomenal drama that played out over the past few days. So I'm coming in with a finished story. It all ended happily, but it was kind of exciting and involved the governor's office and mayors. And we kind of stuck to our guns and we did the right thing. So that's always good. With that, any other comments anybody would like to share?
Well, Mr. Chair, the obvious thing, you've made an announcement.
Yes,
and so the world knows, and I just want to, we've got some time yet before you're leaving, but I just, want to extend my thanks for your leadership over these past, 6, 7 years, whatever it's been.
Seems like it, yeah.
Yeah, lifetime, 100 years. But it's a big deal, and I know it's in the news, and I just appreciate all of your leadership and your hard work.
Thank you. I won't cry, but I really feel committed to this organization. I've been telling folks I am not running away, and it is in such a great place, and all of you and the trajectory of tremendous staff, I feel really good about it. So, but all good things come for me to an end. I've got a few other chapters I need to focus on, including my spouse, who's been texting me about various issues that she wished I wasn't in a meeting she could talk to me about. And every so often she says, "Tell me again why you're doing that." And I'm like, well, I think all of you know why. It's just a tremendous honor. So thank you for that. And I'm not disappearing yet. I'm not ever disappearing, but we got a couple more months. So yeah. Anything else for anybody, Mr. R.A.?
Mr. Chair, two things I'll add on the construction piece. We, through the construction, fixed, so what was accomplished, I think, is just good to have as well on the Green Line work going on and why it was so important. We fixed 2 areas with switches that allow you to switch tracks. The heating elements were completely done at their useful life. So had it gotten cold and they not been replaced, we would have had catastrophic issues going into next year. And so it's a big deal. It ensures that we can continue to use all the tracks in the way that we need to. We can switch tracks at both the Rice and University area near the Capitol, as well as in Lower Town in downtown. And we replaced 9 rail breaks that had happened along the line, which had us on slow speed restrictions to be able to maintain safe speeds. And what does that mean? It meant we've been having it added 5 to 10 minutes per run every direction from US Bank or from across downtown to the other side of town here at Union Depot. For about 25,000 people every single day. That really adds up to a lot of inconvenience on the congestion side. And we were now reporting full speed ahead as of this week, which is a huge win for our commuters and our service day to day. The other complexity with the Green Line is because the rails are embedded in the ground, it's not as easy as the Blue Line when those rails are embedded in like the rock substructure. And so that adds a whole degree of complexity to the project. So thanks to our partners, but it's a real big win for our continued arrival times and ensuring everything's on track. The other piece I just wanted to add with the Yacht Club Festival specifically in downtown, it brought about 35,000 people a day for 3 days. It was a huge success for the city and for all our regional, it's a huge success for the entire region. It was the biggest outdoor festival happening across the region. Commissioner Carter's got pictures, I can assure you of that. She sent some around, so if you want to see them, I just called you Commissioner. Council Member Carter has some pictures. She was sending a few of them to me, and I was paying attention all weekend as well. But it provided us with an opportunity to get to, in real time, do a test from this year to last year. And that last year, there were no BRT services operating out of downtown St. Paul. And so we kind of had a control year and now an experimental year. And so last year, there was no Gold Line and there was no B Line. The Green Line was running the entire time. But now we had, Gold Line, B Line all 3 days. We ended up with Green Line the last few nights. And we haven't seen final ridership data, so I don't want to overshare stuff I don't have. But from an anecdotal perspective, and from what we've seen, our BRT system carried a significant number of people. I'm going to say probably outpaced what we were carrying on the LRT system, in part because of who it connected across the region for the particular event. And I will just say on Friday night, I came down and sat across the river and then took transit home on the B Line because I wanted to firsthand see how it was going. Because as the chair mentioned, we were all deeply invested in it going well. And I will tell you, it was busy. The station platforms, people found them from across the river. There were trip agents out helping make sure people knew what they were doing, checking fares, et cetera. And we have pictures from the Gold Line that show the entire station platform is full with people to go home. And not overly full, but like the way you want to see transit being used. And so as our region moves beyond mode to expectation of service on the metro system and beyond, I really view that as a big win and one that we can build from across this region as we move forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. Ms. General Counsel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll pass.
All right. Well, 6:01. We're 1 minute late. This meeting's adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you.